Hi, my name is Shirley Haber, and I'm a volunteer. I do a lot of volunteer work. So I've been volunteering for many years. It's in my blood. But in the year 2000, there was an event that was very motivating and very upsetting. And as well, the year 2001, another event, a different event that was very upsetting, and both caused a spike in anti-Semitism. And I knew something had to be done. So I set about starting an organization. At that time it was called the Media Action Group, and I gathered a lot of people quickly who were very concerned as well. People who wanted to do something but they didn't know what to do. And so I started this group as a service group to guide people, helping them to know what to do and how to do it to help fight the anti-Semitism. So the first event that happened was the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. In 2000, it would be September the 29th. It's sort of etched in my memory that there was a second intifada in Israel where the civilian population within Israel was attacked by the Arabs in the area, and it was a terrible terrorist attack. 1,000 Israelis were killed, murdered, and thousands were injured, severely injured, from suicide bombing and different kinds of terrible things. So that was the first event. The second event was the year 2001, which was less than 9 months later. And that was more like 11 months later. And that was Durban. And that was the United Nations World Conference on Racism and Xenophobia. And that was the start where it should have been fighting anti-Semitism. It inspired anti-Semitism and provoked anti-Semitism throughout the world. And the world was shocked, the Jewish world was shocked at the amount of anti-Semitism that happened as a result of Durban. So between those two, the media, the print media, newspapers, and radio and TV were filled with all kinds of articles and information and letters to the editor. And the information was so wrong, was so inaccurate, and so terrible for Israel. It was all against Israel, demonizing Israel. So I knew that we had to act. So I motivated people to start writing letters. And I told them I would set out, it was on the internet, and the internet was still new 20 years ago. We take it for granted that the internet's, it's here, it's always been here, but it's not. It's not so. 20 years ago it was new, and I used the internet to give information, and I would send out a writing challenge to my group, and they would write letters, and they would involve accurate information, the truth, telling the truth. This is really what's happened, and it would help people to be able to see the news for what it was, that the news is not always correct. In fact, a lot of it is inaccurate, and that in terms of Israel, it's all about slamming Israel, demonizing Israel, telling actual lies about Israel. So this was a major thing that I started. I was the chair at that time and the motivating force, you could say, and I involved a lot of volunteers. We would have meetings at least once a month, maybe every 2 weeks, and I would usually provide breakfast or lunch at my own expense. And it was, everybody was on board, and we had hundreds and hundreds of people that kept coming onto our list, so that when I sent out information, they knew exactly how to write it, who to write to. I would provide email addresses, and we began to make a difference. Our letters kept appearing in the newspapers, and we would write to the CBC, and they said, well, CBC is a lost cause, but we kept writing, and they heard us. So eventually, we realized after a couple of years that it wasn't enough. The majority of the community at large really did not understand about Israel or the Jewish people, or about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism being the longest hatred. And so I began to realize we needed more. And we began what then legally was called the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation. So it grew out of basically the Media Action Group. And we knew that we had to be able to impart information to people, the community at large. And we then had speakers, because to be able to get information out, if you have a speaker who's very bright, smart, very knowledgeable, they can impart the accurate information that's necessary. And we used to have what we called a lunch and learn in a legal office, a law office, and that was very effective. And we became, the first time we had a meeting in a law office, we had, I think, 57 attendees. It was a beginning, but it wasn't long before we were getting 150 people, and then we had to cut off attendance, and we would have other venues, and we would have like 350 people, 400, 500 people, and we began to make a difference in getting the information out there. The world needs to understand about anti-Semitism. Back then, people were taking it for granted. Oh, it's going to go away. It's not such a big deal. The major organizations, they did their part, but I realized we needed to do something drastic, and we needed to take advantage of using the internet. The internet wasn't used at that point, and we actually did a lot. How successful? Those kinds of things you can't measure, but we know that we actually connected with a lot of people. And to this day, what we're doing now, immediately after COVID started, we transformed into using Zoom, and we have had the most incredible lectures with huge attendance. And we've got them on our website, and we're trying to make a difference. So another one of my principles is networking. And in networking, we are in touch with many other organizations, and not just Jewish organizations, because anti-Semitism, Elie Wiesel said, anti-Semitism starts with the Jewish people but never ends with the Jewish people. And we need to have partners in the community at large. So we have Jewish organizations, but in our coming event right now, we have Muslims Facing Tomorrow, we have the Friends of Jesus Christ Church, we have the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem. On our board, we have non-Jewish people, and on our steering committee, I had a lot of non-Jewish people, because they care. They see the problem, they understand it, and we've got some really bright people. So one of the first speakers we had was Daniel Pipes, and we had it arranged. We were partnering, we do a lot of partnering with different organizations. We were partnering then with Canadian Friends of the Hebrew University, and everything was set. We were going to have young people involved, and he was going to speak at the University of York University, and then he was going to speak at Beth Tikva Synagogue. And a few days before, one of the professors at York decided that they didn't like Daniel Pipes because he was saying things about how universities should be fighting anti-Semitism, that kind of thing. So they pushed, the people who were against this event pushed York University to cancel. And then they made a mistake. They were kids. They wrote up in the National Post, we stopped Daniel Pipes. And I said to myself, this has got to stop. No way are we stopping Daniel Pipes from coming. They're not stopping our event, because he's going to explain to the community at the different events that he's going to speak at exactly where the inaccuracies, the untruths are, and help people to understand about anti-Semitism and Israel. So I contacted somebody in Winnipeg who knew the president of York University, and phoned her at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she said, why are you calling me at 2 in the morning? And he said, is it true that you've canceled out on Daniel Pipes? And she said, oh, we'll have to take a look at this. And in fact, it was reinstated, and he spoke. Now they cut down how many people could actually attend at York University. Instead of having a huge crowd, they said it would be limited to 150 people or 200, and it would be in the gym, and they'd have to signal who was coming, in advance. They'd have to register. But at Beth Tikva Synagogue, we had over 1,000 people who attended, and that preceded with the young people. They came, and we had a special lecture there for them with dinner before the major event itself. And Rosalie Abella actually introduced Daniel Pipes, and it was a phenomenal event, just phenomenal. So you asked about something where I felt good and I had influence, and this is what happened. What I did is I wrote to my writers of the media action group at that time, because that was early, I think it was 2003, something like that. So I wrote and said, write letters to York University, to Laura Marsden, who was the president at that time, and tell her that she has to involve Daniel Pipes, reinstate him, and phone her a call, and they did. And she called the person in one of the professors and said, what am I going to do? I can't use my phone. I'm getting all of these phone calls, and my email is blocked. What am I going to do? So this was like 18 years ago, 17 years ago. So at that time, remember, computers were not as efficient as today. Well, and even then, what are you going to do without your computer, without being able to use a phone? So she spoke to a professor, and he said, well, maybe you need to reinstate Daniel Pipes, and then maybe we can get the phones working again. So I received a phone call, and I said, maybe you better, lift some of the pressure. So I wrote to my group, and I said, okay, stop phoning, but keep writing. And eventually that's what happened, is that York University came around. But it didn't happen just like that. They needed that pressure, and they needed to understand what was happening. By the way, I read that today in Canada, and of all the hate crimes, 60% are against the Jewish people, are anti-Semitism. And they're not just, oh, I don't like you. It's severe anti-Semitism, hate crimes. So this is something to keep in mind. It's not something I'm doing because I feel like doing this. It's because it's serious. And there was another speaker, I think it was Elie Wiesel again, who said, it's no longer an urgency. Right now we're in a crisis. It's an emergency. That's what he said. So, and he has been dead now for a couple of years. So this is even like 5-6 years ago when he said that. Then it was an emergency. So right now we're walking around, everything looks calm, it's beautiful here, but anti-Semitism is severely on the rise. And I'm worried about the Jewish people in Canada. In terms of telling young people today, I can speak for myself. I'm a proud Canadian. I'm a proud Jew, or Jewess. I'm proud of my ancient homeland, Israel, for what they've accomplished and what they are doing and standing up. And young people today have to have that confidence to stand up and speak out. We're told, don't say anything, be politically correct. If there's some kind of an interaction, no, stand back. But that's not what we need to do. We need to stand up strong, be proud, and take a stand. And that's what Israel has done. They are taking a stand. They are smiling. They are considered one of the happiest countries in the world. So they know that it's important to be proud, stand proud, and that's what our young people have to do. And speak out and tell the truth. We need to get the truth out. So from my perspective, I think it's very important to be inclusive, to include everybody, and that we do not, in our lives, we do not walk alone. Now in COVID, we are isolated, but generally speaking, we're with others, and it's important to include everybody. Like when we walk in this park, there must be 90% of the people are immigrants from other countries. 90%, that's a lot. But when you go, I walk along and I think, oh, I know that person, they're like me. And then I listen to them talking and they speak a different language. So it's important to include everybody. And that's why in our meetings, in our steering committee, our board, we include lots of different people, and other people care. So it's important to include those who care and build bridges. It's not good enough to say, oh, my organization is going to do this. We're going to do our thing. No, we need to work with others. We need to network. We need to work with other organizations and show that we have a united front, that we all care, that we all have the same values, and we want to stand up for those values. So we're having an event next week on Wednesday to honor Jacques Gauthier. He is what you would call a present-day beautiful person, okay? And he has done so much for the Jewish people, for Israel, a righteous Gentile. And I have called many, many different organizations, and immediately they said yes. So we have over 25 organizations who are co-sponsoring with us. Community supporters, we call them. To me, that's bridge building. It's working with others, and they will call us and say, I'm having this event. Sure, and we'll promote their event too. It's working together. it took a lot of years to build up the relationship with these organizations. It didn't just happen, but now they know me and I can contact them and they know who I am. And so it's really easy. It's like calling old friends and being able to say, we're having this event, would you like to be a community supporter? Sure, and just send us your logo. And we've got other logos on our brochure, which is a gorgeous brochure. One of our major events that we had was in 2017, and that was the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. So one of the people in our group was a playwright, and she also was a director, and she created a play, and it was absolutely incredible. And we had to set it up so it was supposed to run for one night, one performance. It ran for 3 performances, and we had almost 1,000 people who actually saw this play, and it explained about the background of Israel and what Israel was all about and how it came to be as San Remo, the Balfour Declaration. And it was outstanding, but it took a lot of work. But we would have meetings where there would be like 20 people sitting around the boardroom table, and everybody worked so hard with the publicity and just every facet. With the actual theater, we had it at the Toronto Centre for the Arts in North York, and it was a wonderful, wonderful event. So it's hard to look ahead and to read the future, but the organization, the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation, has been very kind, that they've allowed me to be founding president and basically participate and give information and give guidance. And I tell you truthfully, I feel appreciated, because they will say to me, but you've had the experience, we want you to be involved. And they give me a lot of freedom. So in terms of volunteering, I'm able to do as much as I can, and there are no restrictions, or they don't say, no, you can't do that, and they listen. And right now my family comes first. They're very important to me. My husband comes first. He's very, very important to me. So anything I do as a volunteer now, I have to work in. But my husband gives me enough freedom to be able to work at this. And so there's so much to do in fighting anti-Semitism. The future looks very, very frightening to me and to a lot of people. And I'm not sure where it's going, and I don't think anybody does. But we have to keep standing strong. We have to keep defending the Jewish people. We have to keep defending Israel. People will use anti-Zionism as an excuse and say, oh, it's not anti-Semitism. I like the Jewish people. It's Israel. Well, anti-Zionism or Israel is a cover for their anti-Semitism, because Israel is really the nation of the Jewish people. So when they attack the nation of the Jewish people, they're basically attacking the Jewish people. And a lot of people don't realize that. So there's a lot to do. Thankfully, and thank God, Israel is standing strong. But the threat of Iran today, with the development of the nuclear arms, and if Biden becomes president, I shouldn't be saying politics, but he wants to go back to the JCPOA, which is the plan that Obama put in, and that's dangerous because it's going to allow Iran to develop their nuclear arms, and nuclear arms that will be against Israel, but also the United States. And guess what? Here in Canada, we are adjacent to the United States. So whatever happens to the United States is going to happen here. So yes, I'm very, very worried about the future. And so volunteering, we need lots and lots more people to volunteer. And they are. Lots and lots and lots of people are volunteering and pushing forward, but we have to remain strong and resolute. Our website, so it's caef.ca. You can get a lot of information. We've had so many speakers, and they're all there. We've had hundreds of speakers. When you take a look at the past events, and you go into previous events, I was shocked when I went to look there yesterday to how many events we've actually had. It's quite rewarding.